Hey guys, it's Sam, and today I'm going to be wrapping up my 2023 reading with some stats and things and telling you how my last half of the year goals went because I split them into first half of the year and second half of the year, in case you don't know that. I track all my reading on a spreadsheet, so I will be showing you some infographics and things here. So this year I read 77 books total. This is not as much as last year where I read 100. But also I feel like this 75 mark, the 75 range, is gonna probably be where I sit from here on out in life, generally speaking. That averages about 6 to 7 books a month most months, which feels very attainable to me. And I read 28,773 pages. As far as the types of reading that I did, this stayed stable to me, even though it felt like less. So about 37, almost 38% of what I read was standalones, and the rest was a series of some kind, whether that was a series, a trilogy, a duology, or some kind of companion book. Now, as far as series, that felt to me like it was less than before, especially less than last year, because this year I completed 5 series, and last year I completed 11, and then I caught up on 2, and I DNF'd 4 series. But then when I looked at the chart for series reading, it ended up being about the same as last year. Last year I read 36% standalone, and the rest was series. So this was just the case of I read more books last year. But to me, I was like, oh, I really need to prioritize series. When I saw this number of series completed and things, I was like, oh, I want to complete more series and I need to focus on series more. I do focus on series. I just the same amount, same percentage read for series. So yes, I will talk about that in my 2024 goals video that I will have separately from this. I still want series to be a thing and wrapping up series to be a thing. But generally I was still reading the same amount of series versus standalone. And I still like reading standalones too. So it's not like I want to give that up by any means. I just have a lot of ongoing series. As far as genre, no surprise here. Almost 62% was fantasy, 13% sci-fi, which is somehow less than last year. But also last year, I read some more paranormal and some other genres, and romance and stuff that I didn't read as much this year. But again, in my head I was there was more sci-fi, but apparently not. I really would love to get up to 25% sci-fi, honestly, because the sci-fi I read I always really like. Nearly 4% horror. Last year it was 3%. So I read a smidge more horror. And then I read some more witchcraft and nonfiction books this year as well that took up some space. The way this graph looks is not at all surprising to me. As far as bought, borrowed, and owned, I think I did pretty good with this year. More borrowed than I even thought that I would. So that was a higher number. But 61% of the books that I read, I owned, which is great. I mean, I still didn't get everything off of my physical TBR in the way that I was hoping, which I will talk about in a second. But really good. 61% already owned. Really good. Almost 29% was things that I borrowed from Libby. And then only 10% were things that were bought. Or, I mean, even with bought here, sometimes that's even stuff that I was sent or gifted. I have a separate graph for that. So that was in that new to the shelf category. So yeah, as far as that acquired from category, 37% Libby. 20% were books that were previously gifted to me. So again, I owned them, but they were previously gifted. About 18% were from publishers. This is again, physical arcs that I was sent or things that I was sent from publishers. I'm at the point where publishers only send me things that I ask for, or they will ask me do you want this? And I'm like, yes, this is something that I already wanted. So I'm not just getting random things from publishers anymore. They kind of know to just send me limited things that I'm actually interested in. And again, only 18% was something that I had previously bought myself. I actually don't tend to buy a ton of books. I always tend to ask for books for Christmas, birthday, things like that. So a lot of the books that I bought weren't fiction books. They were mostly probably witchcraft books, nonfiction books, things like that. Probably only a few of my fiction were actually things that I personally bought because I just asked for them for gifts. As far as the format, nearly 50% physical books. That is not at all surprising. Nearly 30% were audio and almost 12% ebook. I don't even remember which ebooks. I think at the beginning of the year I was reading slightly more ebooks because I didn't feel like I was on my Kindle that much this year. My star ratings. I would like this to skew a little bit more into the 5 stars because I don't feel like I had as many 5 stars this year. I mean, I guess it's similar to last year maybe. Yeah, last year I had slightly more. I had 16% 5 stars. This year I have 13% 5 stars, 43% 4 stars. So solid. I read a lot of, over 50% of the things that I read were things that I enjoyed in that 4 and 5 star range. That's cool. 35% 3 stars, and then only a few 2 stars in there, and no 1 stars. If I was thinking it was going to be a 1 star, I DNF'd it, which I love. So because of that, I had 8 DNFs. Not a ton, but enough to be I won't enjoy this, I'm stopping. As far as the age ranges, Again, not shocking. 84% adult books. Yes. 11% YA. Still have some YA here and there. Some of that is just getting some things off of my shelf that I had previously had. Like, I don't even know if I have, I'm curious actually. I don't even know if I have any YA books on my physical TBR right now. Let me go look. I have only 3 on my physical TBR right now. So I think between those and maybe what we choose for book club if people choose YA books, but I'm probably not going to be reading a lot of YA. As far as types of rep, I love the way this graph looks, although I will say that it deceived me in some ways, which I'll get to in a second. But nearly 58% of what I read had some, like, multiple kinds of rep. So I track if there are characters of color, if there's LGBTQ plus characters, if there's mental illness, and if there's disability. So 85% of what I read had something in there, whether it was one kind of rep or multiple. Most of it is multiple, obviously. Almost 60% is multiple. I want to, I think, change this in the future for tracking, because as far as none, this is what I talked about last year too, that when I mark none, it's for, all of those are my, like, nonfiction books or like witchcraft books or something. I don't really feel like it's like representative of necessarily what I'm reading when I'm reading a thing about just, like, again, a general topic. And, like, it's not that there's not rep or, like, other people aren't included in this. It's more of like an everyone's included in this because it's about a topic, you know? So I might change. I still want to have a none in case there is a book that I read that has, like, no rep in it really. But I'm also, I think, going to add, like, an NA category, because I think most of these nuns would fall into this, like, NA category of, like, because it's not fiction, it's the rep thing is, like, a little bit more murky. I don't know. If you're more of a nonfiction reader, let me know if you, like, track that and, like, what that looks like. Because here is where me reading 85% of things that have some kind of rep in it starts to confuse my brain. If you look at my author race graph, it's, like, the same as it always is, like, every year. And so I'm like, what happens? Only about 23-24% people of color, and the rest are white people. Which, again, I read these books and I'm like, I am reading about characters of color, though. Or, like, queer characters. I mean, I guess this isn't following, like, queer or whatever, but, like, again, I feel like I'm reading books with a lot of rep in them, and then it's like, and I get to this place and I'm like, but then it ended up being, like, not. I think it was like 18 books were by people of color this year. I'm like, how does this happen? So I did look at my shelves. I think a couple of things happened here with this year. One is I'm reading a lot of the books off my shelf, and, you know, again, some of this is just, like, a challenge because 75% of the people that are published are white. Right? And I tend to not read indie or self-pub as much, which is going to have a higher percentage of people of color, or, like, anybody, really. It's just, it's a bigger pool, right, to choose from. But a lot of the there are problems with traditional publishing, and there are things that I enjoy about the crafting of traditional publishing, and both of those things can be true at once. Right, of, like, there being a bar, but also the bar is not fair, but, like, there needs to be, not needs to, but I prefer to read things that have some kind of bar. It's a whole separate video I can make about this. So that is something that's working against everyone. So my graph kind of reflects, like, general publishing, and because I read trad pub stuff the most, like, this is not, like, I'm completely not reading any people of color, but I would like this to be higher. However, the books in my TBR, because those are the books that get promoted more by publishers and whatever, do tend to be mostly for white people. So I will be trying to make a more concerted effort, and I feel like I do this anyway in a lot of the books that I borrow, to the books that are not on my TBR that I'm reading, I will lean towards picking up and specifically borrowing books that are by authors of color if I'm not reading something, like, from my TBR shelf. Not that there's nothing on my TBR shelf, it's just, like, lower. It requires more intentionality. Every year I say this, though, and so I get this as, like, a little bit of a me problem, where it's like I'm trying to be intentional, and I do feel like I'm reading a lot of books by people of color, and then I'm not, because the characters are deceiving me, like, every single time. Because I'm like, okay, I'm reading this fantasy book that has, like, a ton of characters of color in it, but it's not written by a person of color. Something that I noticed, again, this is me reflecting on my 2023 reading, so I'm sorry if it's a little bit rambly, but I think something that also screwed me over here a little bit was this year's Hugo nominees were not diverse, like, at all. I think there was I think just Nevo was, like, the only person of color on that list. Is that true, or is there maybe one other? No, I think that's it. So of the, like, 10 books that I read for the Hugos, only one of those is by a person of color. Where typically speaking, the Hugos do tend to be, like, a little more diverse, or, like, a lot of science fiction and fantasy awards tend to have, like, a mix of different people and different backgrounds and different races and things. So I think that was a little bit of a factor because I would have expected my levels to be a little bit around what they were last year, which is more like, I think it was like 32% people of color. So yeah, we'll see what happens with that. Again, I might not even read the Hugos this year depending on what happens, because I feel like the Hugo reading was like this year, and I might switch to a different award. Something like the Ignite, which is a little bit more like focused on diverse creators and things. So we'll see. As far as author status, 53% are authors that I've read before. That is not surprising. A lot of authors are like, you know, continuations of series, things like that. 20% debut and 26% new to me. I like that spread. As far as the rep that I do pretty well in, almost 78% of the authors that I read are women. This year, 4% non-binary. And then almost 8% were multiple authors. So it was like multiple authors, different genders. And only 10% men. Great. Although 2024 might be a few more men because I have a few series that I'm going to be like continuing with and things that are written by men. But yeah, I think I do pretty good with the gender stuff. Also, if I tracked queerness, which I don't because I've said before, like, hey, I'm not really comfortable like trying to figure out an author's queerness or not to track it for my rep. But I know a lot of the authors that I read are queer in some iteration. So yeah, with diversity and rep and things, it can be like a little challenging to find some of those things and like weigh them all out. And finally, my goals for the second half of the year, I did pretty good on, but didn't finish everything that I wanted to. I wanted to catch up on the Wayward Children series, which I did do. There was 2 books that I had to read to catch up. Did that. I wanted to catch up on Monstrous. I caught up on all but 1 volume. So I caught up on 2 volumes. It's a graphic novel series. I kind of want to do more graphic novel series next year, but we'll see. I wanted to continue the First Sister series. I did not do that, but I will talk about that in my goals video for next year, for 2024, or late this year. I wanted to continue the Chilling Effect series, which I did, and I wanted to start the Live Ship Trader series, which I did with Ship of Magic. So yeah, a little bit at the end there, like it's Hugos. Hugos always screw me over. So that's like, I like that project, but also it's like, it impacts some of the things that I want to get done. We'll see what I do with that moving forward. So yeah, that was my reading stats for 2023 and how I did with my goals, and I will be seeing you very soon with my 2024 reading goals and plans and things that I'm switching around based on my reflections from 2023. Comment below, let me know how your 2023 reading went. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all guys soon. Bye.